Hey, you know, here, I'm going to move my camera. I've actually been talking to you for 10 minutes and I didn't realize that I hosed this up somehow and I didn't actually start the broadcast right. This is my first live. So I'm kind of embarrassed about that. But hopefully you'll forgive me for that and we'll go ahead and make this work. I'm hoping that any of you that are out there that you can actually let me know in the chat and see, let me know that you're there, and then I'll able to pick back up with you. And I'm really so sorry about that, you guys, because I've marked my canvas. So we're going to go ahead and start over so I can catch everybody up, and hopefully we'll all get back into alignment. So can someone do me something and chat me, and so I can see if the group chat is working? It says I'm live, and I don't see anything coming through in the chat, but hopefully, I see there's viewers out there, so hopefully you're able to hear me okay. And if someone can let me know, or if I don't know, if maybe I just messed it up so that I can't see it. Anyway, I'm going to go back over and start my canvas, at least go back over what I did on the canvas to get the canvas started, and bring you all up to speed. So you can see that I've been chatting away with you all and marking my canvas. So I'm going to go ahead and move my camera down so that you can see see my table, and we'll try this again and see if we can't get this to work. Okay, see, there's my beautiful canvas all set up. All right, let's try this again. I'll walk through the steps, and then hopefully I can catch everybody up. So I'm going to go ahead and mark my canvas, and I have these stencils that I've designed and used, and a chalk pencil. I'm using the General's charcoal white, so it'll come off the canvas fairly easily. So this is the stencil. This is a 5 3/4 stencil that I use for the smaller canvases, and it's really nice to have something like this so you can easily mark. So the first thing I did is I actually found the center of my canvas by marking from corner to corner and then finding the center. And this is just a canvas panel that I've painted a flat black. I use chalkboard paint often, or just a flat black, so that it's easy to accept the marks from the pencil. And I don't use a regular pencil. I have found those impossible actually to get off of the canvas at the end. Now, if you're using a cardstock or something like that where you can erase it, I think that's fine, and I've done that too. But at any rate, I find the center of my canvas first. I know there's a tendency to kind of like try to line it up to the canvas like this, and I think you can do that fairly easily, but you know, sometimes the canvas is off a little bit. It's maybe not entirely square or not the exact size. So I find it easier to just go ahead and mark the center, and then I place the stencil down. And in this particular video, or this particular painting, which is this one right here, which is, I think, really pretty. I think it turned out really great, and it's got simple colors, but it's quite effective, I think, with the petals and then, you know, the sort of leaf type motif here. It's actually an 8-segment mandala, so it's pretty basic. These are 16 segment stencils, but we're only going to use the 8 sections. You could do all 16 if you wanted, but I sometimes think that that can be overwhelming to have that many marks on the canvas, but if it helps you stay aligned, then that's what, you know, just use what works best for you. So I'm going to go ahead and line this up to the center. And then, of course, I have these center pieces here. I'll just mark those. And then I'm going to mark up the 8 segments. And I'm going to go ahead and redo this for those of you that are starting. I want to shout out to my Facebook group. Hi, guys. I know I saw some of you on the live a little bit earlier. So I know you're out there. I wish I could see chats and speak to you, but we'll see how we get that working. And we'll just go ahead and mark this. There's the 8 segments. And then I am going to do all of the circles around. And I'm doing this fairly lightly. And we'll just keep going all the way around till we have all of these marked. Okay. And then we should have a nicely marked canvas. The next thing I'm going to do is start adding these petals, and it's for these petal shapes right here. We're going to actually give ourselves some little guides to work with. And I have also designed these stencils, these mandala stencils, which I really love. So you don't have to have a stencil like this, of course. You can freehand it. You can make a paper template. There's no reason that you can't do that. I just wanted the ease of having certain shapes available that I could easily rotate on my canvas to get the look that I was going for. So we're actually going to use this one right here. And the way to use this is this outer circle here is a 2-inch circle. And that's going to form this section right here, this outer ring, these 2 outer rings. And so to use these, we simply take it and line it up to the the top of that 2-inch mark, or that 2-inch circle. And then it's just a simple matter of tracing these. Line it up so that it's in the middle, so that it's centered on your line there, and then just rotate it around. And then mark it all the way around. For each of these petals, just rotating as we go. And keep turning it. I hope you guys can see this okay, that my camera's at a good angle. That's the thing about technology. I'm just going to keep going and hope that everybody's okay and that you all are able to follow along. And I'll just keep rotating this until I have my 8 petals on. And then I have my canvas marked. See how easy that is when you have stencil to work with? I think it really makes it easy. All right, we're ready to go ahead and start painting. Now, the tools that I use are these Crystalite Crochet Hooks and these set of nail dotters. I know we all use different tools, so I'm going to tell you from the size of hook that I'm using and what the millimeter is, and hopefully you're able to convert that to something comparable if you're not using this particular set of tools, because some people are using the transfer punches, some people have other type of tools that they're using. I just happen to like these, and I actually have quite a few of the other tools, and at some point I'll do a little video on the different tools and how they work together. But I'm using these. One thing I've done with these all come marked for those of you that haven't used them. They, of course, are crochet hooks, and they all come marked at the bottom with the number and the millimeters, but it's hard to read. So I've gone ahead and just put a little label on each one of mine so I can more easily and more readily identify which one I'm working with. So these are the tools I'm going to work with. And then these nail daughters. Now, these nail daughters, it's impossible for me to actually tell you which ones to use because all I found that the nail dotting sets are all different. And so you're just going to have to experiment and sort of get used to what the set is that you have, because it's unlikely that we're all going to have the same set. Even if the colors are the same, sometimes the actual size of the tools are different. So we'll do the best we can to follow along, but it's really difficult for me to tell you exactly which one of these to use. So I want to look at the pattern with you for just a moment here. We're going to start with the center dot, and then we're going to move out to these other rows, and then we're going to add some additional color. So I'm going to start with the cadmium yellow. I'm not sure if I told you all the colors I'm using. I think I might have, cadmium yellow, orange flame, lipstick. So essentially a yellow, an orange, and red. And then for the green, I'm using festive green and sour apple. Now, of course, I like to use the DecoArt Americana, but you can use whatever brand of paint you like. There are lots of great brands available. So you're just looking for a paint that has a nice consistency and that it's easy to work with. So I have my little paint palette here, and I'm going to go ahead and put some paint out. Now, I don't put a whole lot of paint out to begin with because we don't transition to some other colors until a little bit later. So there's no point to put them all out at one time. They'll just dry up. Acrylics dry really fast. So I just go ahead and put the first ones out that I need. And then, of course, I shake these to get the medium mixed. They're often separated. Lots of the paints get separated. So go ahead and shake them. One tip I'll give you, if you're not an experienced painter, is to tap it on your table, because this can explode. And then I hold the cap a little bit because I've had that paint go flying before. So I'm going to go ahead and put this out. And you can see that that's a nice, yummy consistency there. So I'm going to put a little bit of the cadmium yellow and then a little bit of the orange flame. And those are the first colors that we're going to get started with. All right, I'm going to take my hooks out so I have everything out. We're not going to use all of these, of course. The first one that we're going to use, excuse me, for the center dot is the L11 8mm. So for those of you that are using, another type of daughter, maybe the millimeter will help. And we'll go ahead and dip this in. Now, the consistency of the paint we're looking for, do you see how that kind of beads up on the bottom? It doesn't peak, it kind of beads. That's really the type of consistency that we're looking for. And if your paint is a little bit stiff, meaning that it's peaked, it peaks a lot, then you can add either a pouring medium or a teensy tiny little bit of water and mix it in. I tend to use the water. I don't usually find that I need to use pouring medium or pouring medium to condition my paint. So the other thing that I have to do, and maybe many of you are like this, I actually support my hand when I'm dotting. I don't know, for some reason, for me to just go straight down is a little not the best for me. So I'm using the L11, and I'm just going to go as best I can right in the middle and transfer that paint. And see, I didn't really even, I'm not really touching my tool to the canvas. I'm actually just sort of transferring the paint. And then I will, of course, every time I've used my tool, I'll just wipe it off. I use a baby wipe. I have baby wipes on my table to work with. Okay, and now we're going to move on. So we've got our main dot. Now that's often the hardest part for people, is to get that first dot down. So we're done. We're humming along now. So I'm going to go ahead and use, for the next row, my nail daughter. And I've got 2 more rows of the cadmium yellow. And I'm using the largest one. For me, this is the largest size that comes in my set. And I want dots that are consistently the same. So I'm going to get my paint in, And I'm going to start on one of these uh, primary lines here, and I'm going to drop my paint. Now I rotate my canvas and do a cross effect, and that just helps me line up the rest of my dots. So we're actually going to put 8 down. I'm going to trade out my glasses here for just a sec. There, that's better. And then I've got my cross, and I'll just go back in and do the rest of them. Now, the reason I recommend that you do the cross first is because if you have to make any adjustments for spacing, you're able to do that. And we're dipping our tool in each time so we get a consistently sized dot, and then rotate your canvas. There. And that's how that's looking. For the second row, we're going to go in between, same tool, and just put another row. We want to get our dots as close together as reasonable without having them bleed into each other. So that's why I rotate it. Now, I've seen some of you guys use a Lazy Susan to rotate your canvas. I haven't tried that yet. I actually have one. I think it might actually be like a cake, one that cake decorators use. And so I might try that and see how that works. And I'm going to take a minute here to just see if I can figure out why I don't see any chats or any messages coming in. We've got people on, so let's see. I'm going to go to the settings for just 1 second, so give me a sec here. That didn't work. Okay, well, I'm still not seeing any, so I think I might not be able to see, guys. Um, Let me look one more place and hopefully don't cut everybody off. Nope. Okay. Well, I'm sorry about that. I'm just going to keep going though and hope everybody's following along okay. All right. So now we're ready to move up a size in our tools. And I am going to use, for me, the G, which is the 4mm. And now I'm going to start putting in the orange. So I load my tool up. And I'm going to go right, I'm back on the line and right in between these dots. I think these colors are really pretty together. Okay. Now, one thing that I wanted to mention to you that I do as I'm painting, I don't seem to have any right now, but sometimes there will be a little bubble in the paint. So I just kind of keep an eye on it, see if any bubbles rise up, because when if that bubble is there and the paint dries, you'll get a little hole. So I just use one of my smaller tools and kind of, pop that bubble if I need to. It doesn't look like I have any in this paint, so that's good. Things are looking pretty good so far. All right, we're ready to move up another size, and we're going to move up to the H. So I'm going to be using the H 5 mm, and still with the orange, we'll go right in between and transfer that paint. Once you get the first rows down and you're pretty satisfied with how those are, it's pretty easy to maintain the symmetry of the pattern. There. Now we're going to go in, I'm going to show you the pattern again. So I hope you can see that. It's make sure it's not blurry. It's this. So we just put down this row here, these rows, and in between here, we're going to walk some dots up each side so that they meet in the middle. Now for this one, you kind of have to sometimes judge the spacing here. So this is, for example, this is the largest nail daughter in my set. So I kind of like dry fit it and say, can I get 2 there? It looks like I can, but when I put paint on these, I think it might be a little bit tight. So I'm going to actually not use the largest one of my nail daughters. I think I might move down a little bit, and that way I won't have my paint bleeding into each one. And you can just kind of look at your tools and say, well, which one do I think is a good fit? And this is smaller, but still, I think, workable for us. So I'm going to dip this in. And then to walk the dots, we'll just start here. Go one up to the center. And however many you can get to fit there. And then I'll keep turning this. I'm gonna load a little bit more paint on here. There. And we're just kind of hugging those previous dots. See how that one's a little close? So I'm glad I went down a size in the tool. Now, one thing I want to mention is when I'm doing walking the dots or even um, any of these patterns, I do clean my tool off pretty regularly because that paint can build up and cause the size to be a little bit off. So I tend to clean my tool off quite frequently throughout the process. And get a little more paint there. Um, I've I find this style of painting to be really relaxing and meditative. I probably go quiet quite a lot here. When I'm painting at home in my studio, I'm by myself usually, and it gets really quiet. Some nice music or, you know, um, a podcast or something is nice, television show. Um, but it can be very meditative and very relaxing. All right, so I've got those pieces completed. The next segment is to put these little center dots here. So I am going to use the largest nail daughter in my set, and I'm going to go in with the orange again, and I'm going to place a dot right in between. With the nail daughters, I find that I'm touching the canvas. Like with the other tools, I'm not touching the canvas very much, but with the nail daughters, I tend to touch the canvas, and that seems to work well for transferring the paint. Okay, so we're moving on, and now we're going to do these rings. Now, for me, probably for you, this is the most nerve-wracking part of getting consistently sized dots and, nicely placed. That's always a little bit of a struggle for me. And so I'm going to take my time, and hopefully it all works out. I can't decide how many dots to put around there until I start actually painting, but you'll notice that these are fairly small. The other thing that I'm going to do is there's 2 rows of these. I'm actually going to do the outside row first. You could draw another ring here, but for me, since I already have my canvas um, set up, I'm going to go ahead and do the outer ring, and then I'll go in and do the inner ring. And that has seemed to work out okay. For this particular one, I am not going to use, you can choose which tool you're going to use. I'm actually going to use a fairly small one. Um, it's just a design choice, right? You could make these dots a little bit bigger on the ring if you wanted to. These are fairly small because the design is a little bit spread out, so I wanted to have this be a little bit tighter there. But that's strictly a design choice and how you might like to have your piece look. So I'm now going to move to the lipstick, which is the red. And, and of course, you're using whatever kind of paint you have. And I noticed that this multi-surface, and this is satin. Most of the Americana paints are matte finish, the regular acrylics. This one is a satin, and I do notice it's really pretty. I do notice it does have more of a gloss to it. I don't you might can see that picking up the light a little bit, but it's got a little bit of the gloss to it, and that's really nice. This would be really pretty with gloss enamels too. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Now, we want these to be consistently sized, so that means we're going to drop our tool in almost every time. I sometimes can get 2, but not more than that. And I'm going to try as best I can to stay on that line. And if it helps you, on this particular stencil, these are spaced. So you could, draw these in like this, if that helps keep you on track with where you want to be painting. Okay. All right. I'm going to keep going. Trying to keep these nicely spaced, but not bleeding into each other. And I will rotate my canvas periodically. And this is definitely the time when you kind of want to take your time and go slow. And as I mentioned, every now and again, I'm going to clean the buildup off of my tool so I keep it fresh. And then I'll just keep going around. And you can see that I'm still supporting my hand every time I come down on one of these dots. I thought it was such a good idea for the group, the Mandala group, the Facebook group, to recommend a dot along. It's nice to have friends to paint with. I teach classes. I teach at a local adult education it's called Colorado Free University, and they do a lot of adult education type classes. I've been teaching there. It's really fun to teach in a classroom setting and paint with other people. Okay, we're coming up on the close of this one. So as we get nearer, we're going to have to see how close we get to our starting dot. And I have no idea how many we'll end up with. But that turned out pretty good. All right. So as I mentioned, I did the outer ring first, and now I'm going to go right inside and do the inner ring. Now the inner ring, it's smaller, right? So it's not going to necessarily line up or have the same number as the previous row. So don't worry about getting them exact. They're going to be fairly close, but you don't have to worry about getting them exact. So I'm just going to start going in, and I'll just start right below. And again, this is all just a design choice. You know, as I mentioned, you could use, if you didn't want to do 2 rows, for example, you could just make larger dots, and that would look really pretty too. I'll clean my tool off again. You know, it's really funny about these crochet hooks, these Crystalite crochet hooks. Um, I actually saw another YouTuber, someone who does videos. I don't recall who actually was using those. And I used to crochet all the time. My grandma taught me to crochet, and I used to crochet all the time. So I actually had a set of those, and so that worked out. This would be pretty if you wanted to change up the colors. This has a sort of sunflower look to me, this particular design, but it would look pretty in some other colors too. I have to check occasionally to make sure I didn't pick up some paint. I usually end up with paint all over. All right, and here's the final one for that second row. There, good. That looks pretty good. I'm gonna pause just a little minute here for people to try to catch up. I don't really know if anyone's having trouble keeping up or not. Um, but while we're waiting, couple of things. You know, I wanted to talk about perfection a little bit because a lot of us are want to be perfect, and and we're frustrated when we're not. But I'm looking at this one, and you know what? It's not perfect. Like I'm noticing that there's a little more space here than on this section. Um, but I think we got to learn to maybe live with the imperfection a little bit and kind of embrace it, or drive ourselves crazy trying to be perfect. Um, there's lots of things you can do if you feel like there is some imperfection to kind of add additional elements. Because I'm looking at this, one of the things you can do as you go through your painting is to look and see, like, are there blank spaces that you want to come back and fill in? Like right here, there's a bit of blank space here. And if I really felt like I wanted to, I could come in and drop some very small little dots in there to tighten that up and fill that in if I felt inclined to. Or I might put some additional, dots to fill in the space here. Sometimes having the space is nice because it's a contrast and it really makes the design come together. But you can go back at some point and sort of see, are there fixes I want to make because I think it's not perfect, or are there additional design elements that I want to add, more dots that I want to add to fill in and enhance the overall design. So that's something that you can consider. So I've got now the center and the 2 rows here, and I'm going to start these petals now. So these petals have, let me show you the reference here. They've got this little piece here, this little flower center that we're going to put in first. And then it's got the arches, I'll call them the petal sections. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to start these pieces right here. One thing that I like to do, and I'm back to using the orange. I'll use the orange for the outer ring, and then I'll use the cadmium yellow for the inner piece there. So I've got these petals, and I'm going to put that section in, and I'm going to be using the orange, as I mentioned. I think that I'm going to use the same size dots for this one. So I'm going to use the same tool that I used for the red. One thing that I wanted to mention to you is we're going to try to get this little piece in the center here, and then we're going to work around it. One thing that I found helpful is to put what I'm going to call a reference dot, because we are going to put, you could do this a couple of ways, right? You could put this down, this main one down, and then go around it. But I'm going to suggest that you do something called, what I call at least, a reference dot. And that's so that you can help yourself get the spacing right. So I'm going to take the tool that I'm going to use to make my the dots that are going to go around, and I'm going to pick up some of that orange. And I'm going to put a reference dot right here. And that's going to help me get my spacing, because let me see if you can see that. Yeah, can you see it? I'm going to do that all the way around, and then I'm going to go in and put my main center dot down, and that's just going to help me line it up a little bit. So I call that a reference dot, so that I can orient myself and stay on the line. So I'm just going to do that all the way around. Okay, so I've got my reference dots down, and I'm going to use the H again, which is the 5mm, and I'm going to pick up some of that cadmium yellow. If your paint, you could have covered your paint with a damp paper towel. Mine is still pretty fresh, but if you needed to add more paint, you could certainly do that. So I'm going to pick up the cad yellow, and I'm going to go right above my reference dot. Oops. See how that one's, I think my paint might be a little, I'm going to try that again. See if I can improve that a little better. And if I think I needed to add more paint, I can do that. And I'm going to just go ahead around. And that way, now that I put the reference dot in, I don't have to worry about having enough space to put my other little dots around. Okay. And now I can go back in with that orange and finish them up. Now I'll do the cross method again. So I put one here, I'll put one here. I'll put one on either side. And then I think I can fit two in between. Okay, and that's what we're going for, a little center element. And I'll do that all the way around. Okay, this is coming along. For any of the Facebook group members that are on, I hope that you'll post a picture in the group about what you did. And if anyone else is interested in joining the group, we'd love that too. It's SWD Joyful Mandalas, and really pretty much focused on learning and sharing. Clean my tool off a little bit. I've been getting over pneumonia, so that's the coughing. Okay, just got a couple more to go here, and we're ready then to start on this next part of the petals. Okay, so we've got those centers of our petals in, and now we're going to come back and do these the outsides of these petals. Now I do the outside one first, and then I do this in the center one. You could do it either way, um, and maybe I'll switch it up as we go along. But we've got um, our petal shapes here, so we're just really going to follow the shapes around. I'm going to put out some more cad yellow because that's kind of getting a little bit stiff. And I'm going to start here with the I9, which is the 5.5 millimeter. And I'm going to put my first larger dot down. Now I go all the way around, so I'm using the same, so I'm not trading out I'm not trading out the tools too much, so I'll use the same tool and just go all the way around. I find it easier to not trade out the tools every single, petal. Um, you do what is most comfortable for you, but this method seems to work well for me. Okay, now I'm going to go down a size and I'm going to use my G6, which is the 4 millimeter, and I'm going to come in. Now I'm at this section here, so I'm going to kind of go, I'm right here. I'm going to kind of go out a little bit and then down. One thing I wanted to mention to you, if you're a new daughter, there's sometimes a tendency for new daughters to go up and try to do these. I actually find it easier to work from the what I would call the bottom. So this piece that's closest to me, it makes it easier because it's keeping my hand out of the paint, and I'm not sort of, running the risk of dragging that paint around. At least I'm reducing the risk. Let me put it that way. Sometimes the paint gets dragged around. These colors really pop against the black background. Okay, so I've got those down. And now I am going to use my largest nail daughter. And I'm ultimately going to walk the dots around each here, but I'm going to put at least one dot using the largest nail daughter, and then I'll start my next section. I'll show you what that looks like. So I'm actually going to do this just to help me decrease the sizes. So I'm not going to start walking the dots until I go back to the next round. And we're just building each one of these petals. All right, I'm going to clean this off, and now I'm going to start to walk the dots. See how that's really starting to take shape there? All right. And I'm just going to walk it down to the red rows. Now I have, you can't see it probably, but I have a little drop of yellow on one of my red dots, my red ones. So I'm just going to take a damp. Now, if this red row were really still wet, I wouldn't be able to do this, but I'm just going to take a little bit. Take that off. There. So we have our first outer row. Now, a couple of things I want to mention about this. So I started on the outside. You don't have to do it like that. You could have started on the inside, as I mentioned. I wanted to tell you part of the reason I do that is because I'm trying to keep within a certain border, if that makes sense to you. So I've got my outer border here. Um, I'm trying to control how big um, the painting is because I don't want to go off the edges. I want to leave enough around. So I'm sort of controlling it by setting my outer limits, if that makes any sense. And then I can go in once I've got my outer limit set, I can go in and do the inner piece, and I can adjust the sizes if I need to fit in whatever space I have. But that's how come I went that way. You don't have to do it that way. If you're comfortable with, with starting on the interior and moving out, that's perfectly fine. I just wanted to give the rationale for why I'm doing it that way. So now I'm going to use the G6 4 millimeter, and I'm going to start to do my inner row. Now I would kind of eyeball this and say, do I have enough space to use a G6? Actually, I might not. So let me take that back. And I'm looking at that and thinking I might not have enough space. So I'm going to go in and use my largest nail daughter. And because I'm using the um, largest nail daughter, I can do all of these at the same time here. Yeah, I don't think that G6 would have fit well. If I want to make these a little bit bigger, I could just transfer a little bit more paint. Sometimes have to be a little bit flexible with the designs to make it work. All right, I'm going to start to walk the dots, so I want to clean my tool off. And then I can start to walk these dots down. Right along the inside. Ooh, that was a lot of paint. Okay, so I finished up those petals. Now I have a little bit of space here that I want to fill in. And I'm going to go down to a smaller size tool though, so that I can get a cad yellow dot in there to fill in a little bit of that space. And you see I'm just putting it on either side. Other side of that center flower that we put in. This kind of has a Mexican folk art feel too, doesn't it? As I'm looking at it. Kind of looks like that to me. Maybe it's the colors. Okay. That's how the piece is looking so far. Now we're going to put these little spikes here, these little spiky pieces. It's 3 little dots that we're going to walk the dots up. And I'm actually going to stick with the same size tool that I was using for those for the little inner dots here. And we should be able to follow the line up or close to the line. And I'm just going to walk 3. To give those a little spike there. You could make these bigger if you wanted to. Not use one of the smaller tools, you could use bigger ones. There. Okay, so I've got those spikes added. Now we're ready. We're really kind of in the home stretch here. We're ready to add the greenery. I'm out of frame here, the greenery. And this starts with, there's actually 4. So there's a dot here, and then there's 3 little dots, and then there's the main one, and then we'll walk around that. So I'm actually going to start by putting this one down first, kind of like the reference dot that we did before. So I'm going to start with these. And I'm going to be using the for the festive green. I think this is such a pretty green color. And oops, I'm going to use my G6 4mm. And I'm going to load it up and I'm going to put it right in between these petals and about there. I'll do that all the way around. You can use, if you've used the stencil that I have to mark this, you can see that we're just below this outer ring, this ring, inner one there. Now I'm going to take my largest nail daughter and I'm going to walk some dots down from that one into the center here. And I'll just do 3. You can, of course, do more if you have a little bit of space there and you want to pull that green all the way down. All right, that looks nice. Oops. Now we're ready to go in and put big green piece in. And for that, I'm going to use my, this is the piece 16 11.5mm. And I'm going to put some more paint out because I really, it's a big tool. So I want to be sure to get enough paint on there. If you're having wonky dots, if they like don't have a nice little button on them, then it's often, it's one of 2 things usually, that you don't have enough paint on the tool. So I'm dipping my tool in, but you see how far up it's coming? I don't know if you can see that. Well, so you can see I have a good amount of paint on there, and it's got that nice button sort of bottom to it. It's not peaking, so that's a good consistency. So it's either the paint consistency or you just simply don't have enough paint on your tool. All right, so right above, we're going to go ahead and put that one in. Perfect. If I have to redot it to kind of get that little button or put a little more paint on, I will. There. If your paint's a little bit sheer, you can always drop a little bit more paint on to thicken it up, layer it a little bit. All right. Now we're going to do these pieces here to walk these dots around. And I'm just using the largest nail daughter to put these on. And let me show you how to do that. I'm going to put this crown. I call that a little bit of a little crown there. And then I'm going to put these pearls, which is walking the dots around. I call those pearls. And so crown and then pearls. And I'm going to use the largest nail daughter. Make sure it's nice and clean. And I'm going to start by putting that little crown there that I mentioned. So that's 3 dots. See how that is? And then I can walk the dots around. Great. Looks nice. And we'll do that on each one. Kind of trying to center that crown as best you can. And I have a little bit of paint splatter here. You can't, I don't think you guys can see it, but I have a little there. Well, that might already be dry. So if I got something like that, sometimes there's just little splatter, a little teeny, it's really faint little drip. I'll need to go back when I'm done with some black background, some of the background paint, and just cover that up. I'm always so amazed every time about how these dots they it's just so much fun to see them graduate in size like that. I never get tired of watching that. Got a couple more, but I want to keep my tool pretty clean. Okay, so believe it or not, we're at the final dots for the first layer. So the next thing I want to do is I want to go down a size and tool, and I want to just put one more dot to finish these off. Again, you know, you can add that if you like or not. Okay, that is the finished piece for our first layer. Now, a couple of things about design. Now, in this one, this is the original. This is the original. See how much the top dots really change sort of the character, give it a lot of depth and kind of personality and a little bit more interest. But this is the finished piece, and this is our where we're at. A couple of things as you look at your finished piece, or at least the first layer, you can start to think about, like, mine is pretty minimalistic. So in this one, I didn't add anything in the corners. But if you thought that looked a little bit blank to you, you could consider adding something in the corner. I'm not going to do that because I actually kind of liked it a little bit plain. But as we're looking at it together, that's something that you would want to consider is, do you want to add anything else? And then the next sort of design decision is whether you want to put top dots on and what color you want them to be. So in this piece, I stayed with the colors that I used in the primary, and I just mixed up, you know, um, alternating colors on top of each other. But as you do your piece, you could add a whole new set of colors if you wanted to make it pop. I mean, I told you I kind of thought this had like a Mexican sort of folk art type feel. You could add a new color, a vibrant color that is sort of in that folk art type theme, like maybe a hot pink or um, some other kind of color like that that you think might add a lot of zing and interest to your piece. I'm going to go ahead and, because I think the center piece is dry, the center parts are dry enough, I'm going to go ahead and top dot this so you can see what that looks like. And again, you can use any colors that you want. The thing about top dots is to sort of decide what kind of a look you're going for. Um, for my piece, I pretty much stayed small, right? I didn't, I left a lot of the original color showing as an outer ring. So in this one, for the yellow, for the cad yellow on the inner piece, I dotted it with the flame orange. And then the orange, I top dotted with the cadmium yellow. On the outer yellow, I dotted with the red to kind of pull that red out. And on the green, I top dotted it with sour apple. Now, these are not dry enough on the outer ring for me to do any top dotting. I don't think. We'll see how far we get. But that's sort of how I did these colors. So when you're trying to decide top dots, I used on this, this is the L. So as I look at the size of crochet hooks that I have, I could most likely use, see how I'm sort of just sizing it to see how much paint would deposit. Um, Here's another option to go a little bit bigger. So you can just decide how much of that primary base, that base color, you want to cover up with the next color. And then you can add as many layers, of course, as you want. So I'm going to go ahead and let me check how my paint's doing here. I didn't cover this. I would suggest that you do. Yeah, I think it's good. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use the 6 mm and just get that center done. This is always a little nerve-wracking too, to try to get these centered. There. And then I'm going to use I use the largest nail daughter here, so I'll just use a size smaller and top dot those. The thing about making sure that it's really nice and dry before you add the top dots in, if you, for whatever reason, didn't missed the center, you could wipe it off with a damp Q-tip and not worry about it. But if they're wet, you're not going to be able to do that. So just looking at the size and how much of that primary color you want to show through. And top dotting really does change the character. It adds a lot of depth. Like I said, it could add additional color, adds interest and texture. I don't do it on everything, but a piece like this, I think, really calls for some additional interest. Okay, now we're going to switch out to the cadmium yellow. And these, I think, were the G6. So I'm going to use my largest nail daughter and just add that. And I'm going to stick with that on these next ones. For these, I'm going to go down pretty small. This is actually the smallest size that I have. I don't think you can probably see it, but I'm going to make that small for in here. The other thing about top dots is you can decide how many you want to add. Like maybe you don't want to do all of these. You only want to do the center one. Or you want to highlight certain parts of your painting. And so you want to put some top dots there. Those are, wonderful ways to add more interest to your piece. All right, so I'm going to go to this red, and I'm going to start to do here. Now, I'm going to continue to go around here. So I've got this one here. I might just do those with this, those two with the same size. I don't know if you can see that, but it really starts to add a lot to the piece. Okay. Okay. So I got the larger ones down. Now I'm going to move down in size because I'm now going to start to go around these outer, and I'm going to actually walk my dots down. Now, one thing about these get really tiny down here. So you can make a couple of choices. You don't have to go all the way down each row here, but you can go 3 down or something like that if you don't want to go all the way down. You can take a look and see what you think when I do this about how far you want to go. But I'm going down to a fairly small tool, and I'm going to start on the inside, and I'm dotting in the middle again just to transfer some of that paint. If you start with a small enough tool, you can actually walk it all the way around. And then I want to do these two little. There. I hope you can see how that's looking. Let me just finish these up. Keep going around. Get a little bit more there. Oops, a little off there. Yeah, I think this one really does benefit from having the additional color. I just got a couple more to go. And okay, and then we should top dot our little spikes here, but I'm going to go down to a really small tool because those are not that big. It really is nice to put that to get those done. Yay. All right, and then the last set would be to do the green. Now, these outer ones are not, if I were not doing this in a live, I would never put paint over those until they were a little bit drier. Like I might even let them sit overnight or something like that. But I would like you to see how the um, next color really interacts with that darker, deeper green. So I'm going to put it on the first pieces that we did so you can at least see it. And I think you're going to like how it looks. And this is the sour apple. So I'll just do a little bit so you can see it. And again, just choose a size that you think will work. I'm going to go ahead and dot in this with my largest nail dotter and just go all the way around. I think if I try to walk those dots, I think that it would be too big. All right, and then I'll just use a smaller size. Okay, that's as much as we're really going to be able to get until these dry. A little bit more, but do you see how that, I think you can pick it up on the camera, how that addition of that sour apple really makes the green stand out. I think that's really pretty. And then if to do these, I would, we use the P, we use this size, the P16. I would go down to maybe like the L, the L11 8 millimeter, um, about that size to put. Let's try one and just at least see what it looks like, even though I don't recommend you do this, just because I think the paint's too wet, but we'll do it just so you can see what it looks like. That's really a nice contrast. That's really pretty, I think. And then we would do these, optional, of course, but I would like to do these. And I don't necessarily need to go all the way around because those dots get pretty small. There. And you would just finish up like that. Gosh, I think that looks pretty. All right. So that's pretty much the dotting of the pattern. If you wanted to go back in and add, another layer of top dots, that would be pretty too. I would at least maybe on the center add another little drop of cadmium yellow there. Let's do that and see what that looks. See if I have enough good consistency here. I think that would be pretty. Yeah. And I might not do too much more than that, I don't think, because otherwise they're pretty small. But look how lovely. I think that's just lovely. And then to finish this, of course, we would let it dry really, really well. We go in with a damp Q-tip, damp, not wet, and remove these lines. Just erase them. And then when the paint's dry, you can actually, go over it and get all those marks out. We just erase them. If I needed to do any touch up with black paint, whatever I use for the background paint, I would. Like I can see that I've got a couple of little drips there that I would definitely clean up. Sometimes when you are erasing your chalk lines, you might take off some of the background, so you'd want to go in with that. I have these little fine detailer type brushes that I use, that are really nice, to get into some of these little tight spots if you need to. And then I would take all of that off. I would take a look at it and decide if I wanted to seal it. Now, usually I do, But I, depending on the paint I'm using, I tend to seal, this is just a personal preference, with a matte varnish. Um, and I use Varathane, which is a hardware store. It's a polyurethane water-based varnish. And but there's lots of things you can use. The Liquitex Golden, DecoArt, they all have varnishes that you can use, and you can get them in matte or satin or gloss, whatever your preference is. And I will tell you that sealing them with a varnish is really going to make these colors pop. But you do need to make sure that your piece is well dried. So I would wait days, maybe even a week or so, depending on how much paint you have on here, to really let it dry. You really need to cure that paint, and then you're able to varnish it. The other thing that I would do, if a lot of us give our artwork as gifts, and I think that's really makes it really special. So on the back, I just did the edges, and usually what I do is cut a piece of really pretty kind of complementary um, scrapbook paper or something like that to slightly smaller than the size of my canvas. So this is a 6-inch canvas. I'd probably do 5.5 or something like that, to give it a little frame. That's why I painted the edges black. And glue down, tape, double side tape down a nice piece of pretty pattern paper, or even plain cardstock. You can just paint the whole back of it if you like that too. And then I usually put a little label, artist label. And by artist label, I mean it's just a label that I write my name in and the date. But that makes a really pretty presentation. And sometime I'll do a little, I'll do some maybe a video or some photos of what that looks like, the back. And then that makes this just an absolutely beautiful gift. Also, if you're just displaying it in your home and you want to nicen up the back, make that pretty too. I think that's a really special way to finish up your pieces. So that is our dot along. We made it. We made it group through the dot along. I'm so sorry that I wasn't able to. I'm going to put the camera back up on me. So I'm so sorry I wasn't able to see the chat, because I would have liked to see what kind of questions you all had, or how you were doing with following along, or if you needed me to slow down or anything like that. So next time, I'll figure this out, I guess, and figure out what to do about the chat, and then also starting. I talked to myself for 10 minutes. It was a good conversation, but it was lonely. So, and I didn't even realize it until I saw, like, I don't even know, something popped up that made me think that, oh, I hadn't actually started the broadcast. So get those kind of kinks worked out for the first time. I hope it went okay for you. Leave me a comment on my Facebook page or on the YouTube channel. This is going to go up. I don't know how long it'll take to process the video, but it'll be available on my YouTube channel. If you want to go back and look at it, you can slow it down or speed it up or something like that. So I want to thank you all for joining me for this particular project. I really love this. I love this piece. So I hope you did too. And I want to thank you all for joining me in my studio. Take care. Bye-bye.